All right. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining me here today. Uh, During this webinar, we're going to be talking a little bit about the National Cybersecurity Strategy, and that's a specific document that came out of the White House. Excuse me, the White House, and we'll get into that in just a second. My name is Andrew Roberts. I am the Chief Cybersecurity Strategist here at MicroAge. Uh, and so we're going to get right into it today. I don't have any marketing slides for you. We just really want to go over the document and what's inside there and what that might mean to some of us there. So if we look at the document, this document that we're talking about, the National Cybersecurity Strategy, is guidance that that came out of the White House. It was released just a little while ago, and it really gives us some insight into what they were thinking as we go forward about cybersecurity. Now, the White House is not. This isn't the first time that they weighed in on stuff about cybersecurity in particular. In fact, there's a lot of items that have come out, not just recently, right? We had the memo from President Biden to business leaders about ransomware, but there's also been a number of executive orders and things like that. In fact, this list here goes all the way back to President Obama's tenure in the White House, and the list even goes back further than that. The White House is always weighing in on cybersecurity because it is really an important thing. So everybody's going to chime in and give us some opinions about that. Now, why do we care about what the White House has to say about all this? And really, there's a couple of things. First of all, they're both a market leader and follower. And what I mean by that is, for example, the National Security Administration, the NSA, has been talking about zero trust for a long time now. In fact, much longer than marketing has been doing that. So in that sense, they are a market leader, and they're really driving people towards zero trust and making that happen. At the same time, right, we've been talking, I think, in industry about multi-factor authentication a little bit longer than the government has. So in that example, they're kind of following what the market does and chiming in and saying, yes, me too. But also what they're saying does drive adoption. First of all, just by saying it and put the words out there, does drive adoption and make people pay attention to things. The other thing is that what their guidance and that they put out, what that contains, and some of the things they're talking about, does in fact drive regulations and requirements that people then have to follow. So it does drive that adoption. Now, the other reason that I like to pay attention to what the White House has to say is because it does provide some insight into what the government is thinking when it comes to cybersecurity. What are they seeing out there? What is important to them from a government perspective? And for me, that's very interesting because that oftentimes, again, drives adoption, or they're leading or following the market. So it's interesting for me to do that. And we're going to go over that document now and run through some of the things that are in there. Now, the National Cybersecurity Strategy, right, released in March. My favorite quote, I think, out of the whole document, right? Cybersecurity is essential to the basic functioning of our economy. And that's very, very true. Now, one thing that the document goes into in the beginning is it talks about some emerging trends, right? Systems are becoming more and more complex, and they're recognizing that. AI makes it more complex on top of that. Right, attacks can quickly spill over. I know when the whole Ukraine conflict started, the war in Ukraine started, the United States government was very worried about that spilling over into maybe the private sector, right? That some of the cyber attacks that the Russians might use against the Ukrainians could spill over. So if you remember when the government was talking about shields up right after the start of that war, that's what was driving that, is they were worried about that spilling over. Now, the pandemic has made us more digital. They're recognizing that in the document, and so that is also driving some of what we're doing. They talk a little bit about the bad actors that are out there for us, right? China is one of those bad actors. Russia, again, bad. Iran and the DPRK, which is North Korea, right? All bad actors, and they're called out here in this document. There's lots of talk in here also about resilience and the responsibility that, and we all share that responsibility that, we are going to be more resilient in the things that we're doing, both public and private, and that we must expect more from the system owners that have all of our data and the people that operate those systems. So it's something that's definitely going to spill over. They're talking also about realigning some incentives so that they're going to, favor some long-term investment in cybersecurity, whether that's in procurement that the government does, which drives a lot of innovation sometimes, or if it's through policy, they're going to build some systems for, that can help push things to be more secure. We're also going to build on existing policies that are in there through this document. So it's something to keep in mind of, and very, very interesting. So as we go through this, we'll keep all of those things in mind. Now, the strategy that they put out is really based on 5 pillars, and we're going to walk through each one of those as we go through it. Okay, so the first pillar that they're talking about, pillar 1, is defending our critical infrastructure. Now, one thing that we need to remember is when the government says critical infrastructure, we might think that you're just talking about government systems, and that's not the case necessarily. Yes, they're included in the critical infrastructure, but there are really 16 critical infrastructure sectors that the government is talking about, right? And those are defined here, right? And the government has defined them, right? The Cybersecurity Infrastructure and Security Administration, or CISA, has defined 16 critical infrastructure sectors. So it's not just the government, right? It might be, yes, there is government in there, but you could be in a commercial facility or a healthcare facility, or maybe transportation or chemicals, or one of those other sectors, or your customers are those critical sectors, so you're supporting them. So when they're talking about the critical infrastructure, this is what they're talking about. It's not just government. There's a lot of us that are in critical infrastructure too. And so we need to bear that in mind as we go through and read this, and keep that in mind. So as we go through, remember that when we're talking about critical infrastructure, this is what we're talking about. So going through that now, looking at defending our critical infrastructure, right? The first pillar is broken down into some kind of subsections in there, and talking about that. And the first thing that they talk about, right, it is establishing cybersecurity requirements to support national security and public safety. Now, if we break that down a little bit, when they say they're going to establish cybersecurity requirements, that means they're going to make some rules. They're going to try and pass some laws or some regulations that's going to help secure our critical infrastructure, right? Because that's the goal. We're protecting our critical infrastructure, right? And so that's important to keep in mind. And then maybe some new rules or regulations are going to come along as a result of the strategy. At least they're going to try and make it happen for sure. I can't guarantee that there's going to be more regulation, but it's looking like they're going to try. Okay, the other thing they're going to do is harmonize and streamline some existing regulations, right? And as you read through, they're talking about enabling regulated entities to afford security. All right, now that's an interesting thing that they said in there about enabling regulated entities to afford. Does that mean the government's going to potentially subsidize some of these things? Are they going to try and influence the price and drive it down? I'm not sure exactly what they're thinking, but they're trying to make cybersecurity more affordable. Maybe the government will have some more resources and make those available. I know the state of Arizona, right, has a cybersecurity program right now where the state is buying some cybersecurity tools and making them available to other entities for free, right? Cities, towns, and local governments and things like that for free, because they recognize that those smaller entities can't afford it. So the state pays for it. So maybe there'll be a program like that. We're not exactly sure, but definitely something we want to keep in mind. The other thing that they're looking to do is scale the public and private collaboration, right? The government should be working with the public sector, and they recognize that. They want to emulate the distributed nature of the internet when it comes to cybersecurity, right? We know that the internet is distributed. We should be emulating that when it comes to cybersecurity for our country, right? So CISA, right, the Cybersecurity Infrastructure Security Agency, has been designated as the coordinator for security and resilience. And we're going to talk about, them working to enhance some of that coordination. I know that they have already updated their website to make it very easier to report some cybersecurity incidents to that agency by adding a button right on their website to make that easier. And actually that button comes from something that we're going to see later in the cybersecurity strategy. Another thing what they're talking about doing is integrating the federal cybersecurity centers, right? We already have a bunch of different agencies that are looking at cybersecurity from one angle or another, whether it's Homeland Defense, law enforcement, intelligence agencies, diplomatic agencies, right, or even the military. They've all got cybersecurity silos, and maybe we need to integrate those better. So that's an interesting thing, so we can, get some more benefit out of the collective information that they have. And remember, we're going to share this and scale this through public-private coordination. So maybe we can all benefit from what the government learns and what they know. Another thing they're looking at, right, updating federal incident response plans. This is something that we should all look at our incident response plans. We need to we need to all take a look at this. The government wants to provide clear guidance on how to get support, right? When we're dealing with an incident, if we need some help, how do we get that? So they're going to be looking at making help available to us and working for that. And they're also going to make sure that the community benefits from the lessons that the government learns so that we can all benefit from that. And, on this particular point, we should all look at our own incident response plans too and make sure that we've really thought them through. The time to think a plan through is not during an incident. It's well ahead of time. So if you haven't done that, I would strongly encourage you to go and look and, and really test it out and make sure that it's working. Right. Then the other thing they talk about in this section is modernizing some of the federal defenses. Right. We want to make sure that the government is secure and resilient, especially in their information that they have, the communications systems that are there, operational technology, working towards that. And they really are talking about collectively defending some federal civilian agencies and modernizing some of the defenses there. So definitely very interesting. Moving on now, because we don't have a whole ton of time. Looking at pillar 2, they're really talking about this disrupting and dismantling the threat actors, right? So here again, we're broken into some subsections of that. Talking about the first one, integrating some of those federal disruption activities, right? Law enforcement and other justice departments working together with the Department of Defense, perhaps, to really disrupt some of the activities that some of those bad actors are having out there. Another area that they talk about, enhancing public-private collaboration, right, to disrupt the adversaries. The bad guys work together very frequently when they're attacking us, right? We know that they collaborate. We need to collaborate when we're defending against them. Something that we need to keep in mind. So public and private both working together to disrupt that, right? And they're also call out encouraging the private sector, right, us, to join in some nonprofits for information sharing, like the ISOWs that are out there or other threat feeds that may be available to us, to really share the information, not just to consume it, but to give it back as well. So that's definitely something that we will probably see more of as they go forward. Another thing I talk about is increasing the speed and scale of the intelligence sharing, right? And the victim notification. Now, that's interesting that they talk about the victim notification because they specifically call out faster victim notification, right? This is where that button I talked about earlier comes into play. Since it already has a button where you can report an incident right away so that people get notified faster, right? And we can get some warnings and technical indicators about some bad things that are going on and maybe some other threat context and information as we go through. So definitely interesting. We're already seeing the government move in that direction, even though, it hasn't necessarily been mandated yet, but they're definitely taking this one seriously for sure. The other thing we're going to look at here is protecting the abuse of the US-based infrastructure. What they're talking about there, if you read through that, right, it's really, there's some cloud-based infrastructure that that is US-based, and we want to make sure that we're protecting that. But also, like domain registrars and other registrars that are out there, we want to protect those as well, so that we can lock down some of the bad things that are happening, the phishing and the spoofing and all of those other things that go on. Also, our email resources that are in the United States, we want to make sure that we're protecting those and they can't be used for abuse. And then finally, the other thing they specifically call out is really focusing on some of the hosting providers that are out there too. Consider a lot of big hosting providers that are out there that are based here in the United States, like GoDaddy, for example, is right here. in Arizona with us. So things to keep in mind there. Then the other thing they're talking about in this second pillar, the last part, is really countering the cybercrime and defeating ransomware. Right, we're acknowledging that ransomware is profitable, and as long as it's profitable, it's going to be a problem. So really, we need to take some steps to make it so it's not profitable. That's the only way we're going to get ransomware and get rid of ransomware. So, right, they're recognizing that it's a threat to our national security, not just for the government, but the whole of critical infrastructure. So that may include us as well. And so we really need to leverage some international cooperation, investigate those crimes, bolster the resources that are directed against those abuses. Something we definitely want to keep in mind as we go through this. Now, moving on to the third pillar, right? That's what shaping market forces to drive security and resilience. Now, it's very interesting, right? This is the first time that they're specifically calling out resilience, but it's not the last time. So that's right. Again, goes to talk, defeating ransomware as being resilient, so you don't have to pay the ransom, make it less profitable. So something that we're really driving for, and shaping market forces. When the government says they're going to shape market forces, they've got some levers that they can pull to really shape those market forces, whether it's regulations or requirements that they do, or they're pulling some federal procurement levers to encourage people to build more security in and things like that. It's interesting, but we'll want to see what they've got going there. So it'll be interesting to watch as the future goes here. Now, in the specific subsections of this area, the third pillar, we're talking about, right? They're talking about holding the stewards of our data accountable. That means that the people, right, the people that have our data, right, the Equifaxes that are out there, and then everybody else that's got our data now, they really need to hold those people accountable to protect consumer privacy, right? They want to give support for new legislations, and they're going to require NIST, right, the National Institutes of Standards and Technology, to come up with some new standards when it comes to cybersecurity, especially for the new stewards, for the stewards of our data. So it'll be interesting to see what regulations, what standards come out. And remember, the NIST is an agency, right? I know we sometimes, a lot of us hear NIST all the time. It is an agency. It's not just a framework that you might be familiar with. So there's a lot of standards already that have come out, and maybe some more will be coming along soon. So there. The other thing, right, they're talking about driving the development of secure IoT devices. A lot of IoT devices out there are not very secure right now. And the government's recognizing that and calling it out. And we've got to do a better job of making our devices secure as we go through there. There are so many stories that we hear about fitness trackers not being able to be used by the certain military branches because they're leaking too much data about where they are. Right, baby monitors get hacked, and criminals are able to access speakers and things like that. Or even industrial control systems that are very easily exploitable. We need to do a better job securing those devices, and we, just like the federal government, need to do a better job at requiring the vendors that make these to do their job and secure these devices. And I think together we can work towards that for sure. Right. The other thing they're talking about, shifting liability for insecure products and software service. That means that, if something's insecure, they're going to put more pressure on the manufacturer. So if we are a software manufacturer, a device manufacturer, and we're not keeping security top of mind, that might be a problem for us. At the same time, if we're the consumers of one of those devices and things, maybe some of that liability is going to shift back on the manufacturer. So we're not going to reward those manufacturers for building vulnerabilities in and really make them focus on best practices. And maybe they'll develop some new legislation that will shift that liability towards the manufacturers versus us as the consumers. So interesting to watch that too. Other thing they're talking about using federal grants and incentives to build in security, right? So we've already seen the bipartisan infrastructure law that's got a lot of money in it for cybersecurity. The Inflation Reduction Act and the Chips and Sciences Act. Those are all recent legislations that have come out that have money specifically for cybersecurity. So let's leverage those funds and make sure that the word gets out. And I wouldn't be surprised if we see some more legislation come down the pike to fund it and explain some of that. Right. I talked about earlier about pulling some procurement levers to make this easier to do, right? Shaping those market forces by the federal government saying, hey, you've got to be secure if we're going to buy you. And using those procurement tools that they have, because the government buys a lot of stuff. They can make a lot of rules if they really want to do it. So if they get stricter requirements and put those on manufacturers, those are going to spill over into the business as well, into the private sector as well, to do that. So we'll probably see that coming along. And then last thing, right, they're talking about exploring federal cyber insurance backstop, right? We really need to assess the need for and maybe the structure of some federal insurance response, because frankly, it's getting harder and harder to get cyber insurance right now. Organizations are recognizing that they need cyber insurance because it's becoming more and more likely that there's going to be a problem, and it's becoming less and less profitable for the insurance companies. And if we keep on this path, the market forces are going to drive those insurers out of providing cyber insurance. So maybe the government's going to have to step in. So it'll be interesting to watch that. Into the fourth pillar, right? Talking about investing in a resilient future. There's that word resilient again, right? Really talking about building things to be resilient and withstand some attacks, and so that they don't impact us so bad, right? Talking first of all about securing technical foundation of the internet. Now, if you've been around for long enough, you'll remember that the internet was not built securely from the start, right? The foundation of the internet is flawed when it comes to security. Everything was built right on some vulnerabilities, and we need to work to fix some pervasive concerns, right? The Border Gateway Protocol, or BGP, right? That's got vulnerabilities in it. DNS is unencrypted, and even IPv6 has been slow on the uptake, and all of those things bring more and more vulnerabilities that we need to deal with. So hopefully we can get some of that stuff fixed. Talked about reinvigorating some research and development for cybersecurity, right? We've got to come up with some improvements, and if the market's not going to do it, then maybe the government can step in to direct some R&D funds to advance cybersecurity in the areas of, artificial intelligence and operational technology, maybe some industrial control systems, right? Our SCADA environments, and even telecom and encryption are all things that can be strengthened. Especially if we pour some funds in and start doing some research there. The other thing we need to do is get ready for post-quantum, right? Quantum computing is coming. It's just a question of exactly when it's going to be. I don't think it's going to be very long. I don't think it's going to be next month, but it's not going to be the next decade either. So somewhere in between, exactly where, I don't know. But we got to get ready for it, right? Encryption is foundational to that future. We really need to get some modernized our encryption technologies to make sure that we can accelerate the replacement of that. I know bad guys have started, right, when they're hacking people, they're taking the data even when it's encrypted, because they'll just park it for a while and wait for quantum to come along and break that encryption. So we really got to get ready for that post quantum world. Moving on, right, talking about a clean energy future. We really want to build cybersecurity in as we do that, right? All these electric, everything that we bought are highly have got a lot of IT built into it, and we want to make sure that that's secure from the beginning, right? And then moving on, talking about supporting development of digital identity, right? Knowing who we are so that it becomes harder to pretend we're somebody that we're not, would be good. And then really developing a national cybersecurity strategy when it comes to the workforce, the cyber workforce, right? Depending on who you ask, it could be 300,000 to 1 million open cybersecurity jobs right now. I don't know exactly how many of the number is, but it's several 100,000 vacancies right now. It's very difficult to find people that are good at cybersecurity, and we need to take some steps and really go through and build a good pipeline of getting more people into that cybersecurity workforce. The final pillar, pillar 5, is talking about forging international partnerships and really developing that to share our pursued goals. This one I'm just going to go through really quickly because this one really is about the government more than anything, working with other governments to go through and do things like, build coalitions to make it harder for the bad guys to hide so that we can stop the malicious activity that happens outside of the United States by going to other governments as our partner to work together, right? Strengthening the capacity of those partners too. The United States is pretty strong when it comes to cybersecurity, and not everybody is. So maybe we can help share some of the technologies and skills that we have with those partners and make it harder and harder for the criminals to do business and take advantage of us in cybersecurity. And expanding our ability to help the allies too when they have trouble, because maybe they get attacked and we need to be able to help them as well. So looking at some of those, also building coalitions to reinforce global norms, right? Just we want to hold people accountable, especially the irresponsible states, right? If China does something bad, if North Korea does something bad, we need to hold them accountable for what they're doing and keep that in mind. And then the last thing, right, really securing the global supply chains, talking about onshoring a bunch of technology that is currently offshored and working with our partners to secure the stuff that we can't do inside the United States and work that through. So that's really what there is talking about in this 5th pillar. So that's it. We do have a couple of minutes left. If there's any questions, drop them in the chat. I'd be happy to address them. This is my contact information. If you need any resources or questions about this, certainly reach out to me and let me know. I'll be happy to answer those questions for you or share a link to the cybersecurity strategy itself. So with that, if there's any questions, again, drop them in the chat. I'll be happy to answer. I'm not seeing any questions come in, so thank you for joining me for this quick webinar. I really did enjoy it. Again, email me if you have any questions. I'll be more than happy to talk to you. And with that, I hope you all have a great rest of your day. Thanks.